Today's video, I'm going to show you how I made these legs. These are for a vanity that's going into our powder room. My wife showed me a design she liked. Of course, it didn't have square legs, it had round legs. So I got a lathe, which I've always wanted anyways, and I turned these legs down, and surprisingly easier than I thought it would be. So follow along to see how I did it. All right, this is day one of me working on the vanity for the bathroom. It's going to have spindle legs. It's going to have circle legs. I have never used a lathe ever. I've used a metalworking lathe before, but never a woodworking lathe. My shop teacher made all of us so afraid of using a lathe with the metalworking lathe that when it came time for woodworking, I've just kind of always avoided it. But I can't avoid it anymore. So I bought a lathe. I don't know if you can see it in the background. And it's time to make the legs. They're going to be at the widest point, 3 inches in diameter. So what I did is I picked up some 8-quarter walnut. That's the thickest stuff they had at the lumber yard. And I'm going to start cutting it up into pieces because I'm going to have to glue these together to get the right size blanks to then turn on my lathe. So I got this big old boy here. We're going to cut it into sections first. So like the length I need, a little bit more of the length I need for the legs. The reason that's a good idea is I need to get a flat side. If I tried to run this through the joiner right now and get a flat side, I'd basically have to start like down here and go across to get this whole scoop out. But if I chop it here, it's much easier to get a straight edge. And then here, straight edge, you get the idea. So if you don't need a piece that's this long, first thing you should do, in my opinion, take it to the miter saw and start chopping it to the right lengths. So that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, let's get going. I'm gonna measure stuff out first, make sure I've got enough material. All right, my legs are gonna be 36 inches long. My lathe can support 38.5 inches. I wanna give myself some extra material, so I'm gonna go with 38 inches in length. I'm gonna have to work around some things like this split here at the ends. I've got some knots. I'm gonna do my best to lay this out to avoid those things. So I need 3 inches in width, and then I'll glue 2 together to make it a 3-inch by 4-inch. And then I'll take it to the table saw and make it a true 3-inch by 3-inch rectangle, cube, elongated cube. I don't know, whatever. I can get 1, 2, 3. Is that me? All right, I've got these cut down a little bit smaller now. They're 40 inches at the moment, actually, so I'll need to cut more off in order to get them to fit into the lathe. But I'm gonna give myself extra material for when I run it through the joiner and the planer, because sometimes you get something that's called snipe, which is at the end of cut and beginning of cut. It cuts a little bit extra, goes a little bit deeper, and so you don't get like a perfectly flat finish all the way across the piece. So if you can leave yourself extra, then you get snipe. All you do is cut the snipe off because you gave yourself extra material. I think I've changed my mind. I think the legs are going to be 2.5 inches in diameter, because looking at this, you know what? I'm going to give myself 3-inch blanks though. I'm going to give myself 3-inch blanks because I can always turn them smaller on the lathe. I'd rather have more material than less material. So take it back. So from each of these, I'm going to get 3 pieces. So if you do the math, there's 2 of these. I'll get 3 out of each. That means 6 total pieces, which ends up giving me 3 legs, not 4 legs. One of the legs is going to be back in a corner, so you're not going to see it. So that one, I will end up just using some inch-thick material, glue that up. And you probably won't even be able to tell that it's not glued up from thicker material, but just in case, it'll be hidden in the back right. I'll just use some thinner stuff. So let's get that measured out, and then we'll join everything, rip it on the table saw, plane it, glue it together, and then finally we can take it over to the new lathe that I am still kind of scared to use. Don't tell anyone. One, 2. All right, well, here are my leg blanks. I got glue, I got a bunch of clamps over there. We're just gonna start gluing these together, and then that's it. Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Slap that on top of there. Slap this on top of here. Flip it on its side. Flip this on its side. And we clamp them together. I gave these about, I think it's been about 18 hours. I wanted to make sure this had ample time to dry, just because I'm going to be chucking it up in the lathe And the last thing I want is for one of these to explode on me. So we're going to unclamp them, separate them, and then we're going to mill them again because I want to get these down to perfect squares. Not squares, rectangles. I don't know what I'm supposed to call them. You know what I mean, though. I want the sides, all the sides to be the same exact length so that I can more easily turn this into a leg, a perfectly, circular leg. So yeah, let's undo these. All right, the leg blanks are glued up. Now at this point, I think I could probably just chuck this up and start turning. However, and bear in mind that I've never done this before, so I'm making it up as I go. I think the least material possible will make turning go faster. So I'm going to try to remove as much of the material as I don't need from these, because you can see some of these are a little chunkier than others. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these all down to the same exact dimension. And then I cut them oversized to begin with. So right now they're too long to fit in the lathe anyway. So I need to cut them down to be the right size. And since these are gonna be the legs for Vanity, I'm thinking I'm gonna actually cut the notches for the joinery now. I think that's fine and will be safe while running it on the lathe. You'll see what I mean when I go ahead and cut these notches out. And I also, just because once this is turned into a circle, it's going to be harder to give myself perfect 90 degree faces to each other because it rolls. It's going to be harder to put it through a joiner, harder to put it through the table saw. There's ways to do it. I thought about leaving some little bits on the end square so that I have 90-degree reference surfaces for running it through a table saw or through a joiner. But I think I'm going to do all the joinery now and then turn it on the lathe after that. Again, I'm just making it up as I go. So let's go ahead and get these down to dimension, get the joinery in them, and then we'll start lathing. I'm not putting it off because I'm scared. That's definitely not what's going on. I just think this is probably the smartest way to go. So let's do it. Okay, so my joiner got me two sides that were consistent. So one side, another, and then the planer got me the third. So that leaves one side here that I don't have any pencil marks on because I have not squared it up yet. So what I could do with that, since I just ran everything through the joiner, I know that everything is the same thickness in one dimension. So when I put it through the joiner or the planer, I did it like this. It referenced the bottom, it cut to the top. I didn't change the setting. I ran every piece through, so they're all the exact same thickness. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure what that thickness is, and I'm gonna repeat it this way using the table saw. So whatever this number happens to be is what I'll set my table saw fence to. I'll put it through. That's going to make this side the one that's gonna get cut off here by the blade. It's going to make it square to everything as long as my blade is set up correctly. So just like I had to set up my joiner to be square, I also have to make sure I set up my table saw blade to be square to my fence and to my table. Otherwise this doesn't work. So tool setup is extremely important in this. I'm gonna rip it and then I'll have perfectly square stock and perfectly dimensioned stock. So we're still not even to the point of putting it in the lathe yet. So after all that, we'll cut the grooves out. It'll make sense what I'm talking about when I do it, and then we can go ahead and start turning it on the lathe. The other thing you might notice looking at this is, see the inconsistencies I have in the grain here? These are the big pieces I glued together. These came from the same board, which is why the grain is so consistent on my glue up. It's hard to see where the boards were even glued together. That's why I want to use these for the front legs, because it's just much more consistent grain since they're from the same board. Here, I took the big board I had, the chunky stuff, the 2-inch, and I glued on another piece, 1-inch. And you could clearly see the line between the grain because they're from different boards. And every tree is going to be unique. Every board is going to be a little unique. You can do your best to match grain up. Can be kind of hard, but these two, it's obvious that the grain is different. And for that reason, they're going to be the back legs that you're not really going to see. Yeah, let's go ahead and cut these down. All right, that part's done. Everything's looking pretty good. Now I think the way that I'm going to attach the actual sort of cabinet carcass of the Vanity to these legs is by cutting a notch in them. So basically I'll take a pass here and a here and remove a strip of wood so that a square like cabinet carcass could go into that groove. If that doesn't make sense, it'll make sense in a second when I go over here and do it. I was thinking about using the table saw to do that. The material I'm going to use for the cabinet boxes is going to be 3/4 inch. So I figured I would just go ahead and cut a 3/4 inch notch into these boards, and I could set up the table saw to do that, 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch, but that would cut it all the way through. And I actually don't want that. I only want the notches where the cabinet box is going to sit. So I need stop cuts. Basically, I need that channel for the box to like start here and stop here, because I don't want the legs to have a notch in them, because that'd be really ugly. So I think the router table is probably my best bet for that, to do start and stop cuts, because I could set up a fence and I could put stops on each side. So I lower it in, go until I hit the stop, raise it out, or turn off the router. So that's my plan. Before I do that though, in order to actually measure out and put the marks for where all of those things need to happen, I need to cut these down to their final dimension. I think that's what I was going back and forth on if I should leave some extra material on here or not. I think I'm going to cut them to final dimension now. We'll see if I regret that. All right, now you saw me use a stop block there to cut these all to the same length. My plans call for these to be 35 3/4 of an inch long, but that's not nearly as important as them all being exactly the same length. Would you notice if it was 35 5/8 rather than 35 3/4 when you go to wash your hands at Vanity? Nope, you wouldn't notice. It's only 1/8 of an inch. But would you notice if this leg was 35 3/4 and this leg was 35 5/8? You would, because then the whole thing is going to be rocking. So getting everything cut to the same exact length is much more important than getting it exactly on the right number, at least when it comes to legs, because you don't want stuff wobbly. So that's why I use a stop block. That way I measure once, set the stop block, and then every cut is just made the same way. If I'm like a 16th or a 32nd or an eighth, even a 1/4 inch off, doesn't matter. They just all need to be the same. Okay, let's plan out now for really just the layout of where everything's going to go. Specifically, in my case, what I care about now is laying out the notches for the actual like cabinet part to fit into. I've got a drawing over here that gives me an idea where everything needs to go. I made the legs 4 inches long at the bottom because that's how big a toe kick is to normally on a cabinet. So I figured the legs holding this off the ground, the leg portion should be 4 inches as well, since that's what a toe kick is. I don't know, that's what I'm doing though. And so 4 inches will not have a notch. And then from 4 inches up, it will get a notch. So I just gotta make sure the bottom 4 inches of this do not get the notch. And this notch is gonna be 3/4 inch square. So if we're looking at the end of this thing here, I'm gonna do a notch 3/4 down, 3/4 in, just removing a little square of material so that my cabinet can fit inside of it. Yeah, let's do it. All right, so to accomplish this, I've got my router table here. I've got a 3/4 inch bit. I'm gonna chuck this up. I know that my width of cut will be 3/4 of an inch. I'm just gonna have to raise it up to be 3/4 of an inch in height. I'm not gonna do all that in one pass though. I'll probably do 1/4 inch at a time, trying to cut an entire 3/4 inch out like height-wise. That'd just be a lot. And this is only a 1/4 inch shank bit. So I am gonna err on the side of caution, and I'm just gonna slowly step it up until I get the cut that I need. Come up 4 inches. I've got my bit set up. Focus, dang it. So the bit is sticking out 3/4 of an inch from the fence. So as I cut this piece, it's going to take out that 3/4 inch chunk. Now, the other problem I have is that I need to stop here. I'm coming from down there, running this way with the cut, and as soon as I get here, I need to stop. So here's my plan. I'm gonna line this up right where it needs to be so that I know where to stop the cut. And then I don't have a way to, I have the fence here. This thing's got a fence attachment, but I don't have a way to stop this board here. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna double-sided tape this down as a stop block. And then I'll probably even open this drawer up and throw clamps on, but that way I have an improvised stop block so I can do my stop cuts coming this way. And then like I said before, I'm going to do very, very shallow cuts at a time as I route this channel out of this board. But yeah, that's the plan. So let's do it. Seems pretty good. All right, so far so good. I've got the notches cut out height-wise here. I now need to go further out, so I'm just going to take my fence, push the fence back, and then this bit will be able to come out and make a further cut this way. So that's all that's left to do. Then I'll have my notches cut. I'm being careful that my notch doesn't go to the center of the piece, because that's where I need to chuck it up into the lathe. So if it intersects the center point, I can't chuck it up. And this isn't the center point. The center point's right above it a little bit. So I also want to leave enough meat that I'm not afraid, I don't know, the wood could split and they could fly out of the lathe. So that's also why I'm getting close to the center, but I got to leave some material so I could chuck this thing up. All right, now I've got these notches cut out, but what I need to do is I need to make sure I need to get this bottom part squared up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that same stop block as before, and I'm going to use it as a stop point for these legs. Get them all squared up to that piece of wood. And then I've got my original layout line here. I'm going to sharpen it up, and then I can continue it across all the pieces. And all right, it's not perfect, but at least for my abilities, I'll clean it up a little bit. It's good for me. Here you can get an idea of what I've been going for. So right now they're of course just big chunky blocks, but as I turn them, they should get prettier. So the bottom section here will be the leg, which is why I didn't cut the notch into it. The notches are where the actual cabinet will sit. And then the rest of this will all get turned into a nice pretty leg that goes all the way to the top of the vanity. So I cut these at 35 3/4 inches, and then the top will be 1/4 inch thick, bringing us up to 36 inches, which the internet says is the modern comfort height used for vanities. But yeah, time to chuck one of these up in this guy and see how it goes. Maybe this will fix it. All right, for my first time turning, not too bad. What I've learned is that taking this notch out and then also having this be full piece, very unbalanced. So this thing was wobbling like crazy until I got going, and now it spins, very balanced. It's fine. So I think on the next legs, what I'll do is I'll take a spoke shave and I'll shave off as much material as I can before I put it on here, just to try to cut down on the vibration. I ended up screwing the whole lathe down to a piece of wood and then clamping that piece of wood to my workstation, as you could see, because this thing was moving so much when I started. But now it's here. So what I need to figure out is where like sort of the decorative parts go. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a pencil and I'm gonna lay out the spots that I want to kind of stand proud. And I'm gonna start carving those details in. Again, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I think we're getting there. It's about 3 inches in diameter right now. I want the final diameter to be about 2.5. It's working. Let's keep going. 3/4. Now I've sort of made the mark for my like detail pieces. So if you can imagine this right here where I've got my pencil lines, that stays this diameter. And then this goes down smaller, about a 1/2 inch smaller. So it's essentially like I'll have a 1/2 inch trim stripped around. Then this all goes smaller by a 1/2 inch. And then another trim, and then smaller by 1/2 inch again. Up here is where my sink is sitting. It's sitting inside, and I want it to nestle right up to this trim line. And then down here, this is going to get tapered down into like a foot shape. Again, I'm new to all this, so we're gonna do our best, but that's what I'm going for now as I cut this stuff out. So we finished one of our legs, right? What we need to do now is make 3 more, and I want them all to match. So I'm going to take this, actually goes this way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure each of these segments, and I'm going to transfer marks over from these segments onto my piece so that I know exactly where to cut all of these different things at. That lets me lay out at least like lengthwise where the things happen, but then I've also got to get the diameter correct of each of the sections. So for that part, I'm just going to use some dial calipers. These are pretty easy to use. I don't even really need to reference the numbers, to be honest. I'm just going to measure each of my sections. And then as I turn each down, I'll just continually check with these to make sure I'm getting the same numbers. And then I should be able to turn this to roughly the same shape as this one. It won't be perfect, but I'm learning, you know? So yeah, let's do it. And there you have it. Spindle legs for our bathroom vanity. The setup and all the prep probably took twice as long as actually turning these on the lathe. And then the first leg probably took also twice as long as doing the other 3 after I kind of figured out what I was doing and how to do it safely. Here's a little sneak peek of what we're going to be building in the next video. So we're going to be taking the legs and we're going to be building a cabinet carcass for them. In the next video, we'll finish the whole thing. So this is obviously not done yet. We need cabinet doors and we need a top and we need our sink put in place. So this is only just a little sneak preview of what these legs were for. But if you found this entertaining, please give me a like, please follow along, subscribe, all that stuff people always ask for. I'm trying to grow this channel as much as I can because the more people that follow, the more likely I can start pumping these videos out even like every week or every 2 weeks or, you know, whatever. I love doing this stuff, but I do have a full-time job. So if you enjoy this, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notifications. Thanks. See you next video.